What's going on, YouTube? What's going on, Patreon friends? How's everyone doing today? This is gonna be. Okay, I got too many thoughts going on at once. It's kind of like how I started doing responding to comments, and a little bit how I want to start getting into some kind of like original content, as it were. I want to get into some shop talk. I want to talk about it, right? And I want to spill it in a way that's like conversational, so that. And not like super techie, so it's just like kind of, I'm gonna try to make it fun. That's what I'm gonna get into. But if I haven't made this clear, and if y'all haven't noticed, I am very, very, very passionate about the process that goes into audio production and like all of it, man. It's like from a live perspective, right? Like the studio recording and stuff, very out of my wheelhouse. Like I need people like Kevin and Dave. I absolutely lean on them, and like, you know, like it shows up, like that kind of stuff shows up in my videos, because like audio is not very consistent all the time, and it is what it is. Me being the audio guy, I'm working on it, and I'm learning, and I'm practicing. But what I wanted to go through today was like what like a stage kind of setup looks like, and a little bit of the terminology around it. For my Patreon friends, I'm working on like a bingo card I've been working on for months. God, I'm bad at these things. But of like the more like kind of like individual pieces and like products and tools. But like, so today we're going to talk about kind of like a stage setup for like a performance. So this came from my friend WP on YouTube, and this was a great comment. It was very loaded. So I'm going to get to the technical stuff on this one, and I'll get to like the key change and stuff after that as well. But I will talk on the vocal strain kind of conversation as well. So, okay, so let's start from the top. So I was kind of debating on how I wanted to start this, and I'm not the type of guy to structure something, so this is all off the top. So bear with me, we're going for a ride. So basically, like what happens is like you have a pre-production meeting where like you know the gig's coming. You've basically got it booked on the calendar months and months in advance, because nothing can interrupt it, man. Like we're talking, you got to book backline sometimes. If a band's traveling, they might not have drum kits with them, guitar amps, sometimes not even guitars with them. So like you have to make sure all that stuff's booked in advance. You need vehicles, you need bodies, man. Like it's a lot of work, and it's not very glorious work, but it's like I would say if you like music, if you like the details of production, it's a really cool job. Like you can usually go and jump in with your local like stadiums or like performance centers, and they have like what's called local crew. And basically what you do is like you greet touring technicians and engineers, and you meet a bunch of trucks, and you push a whole bunch of heavy equipment towards the stage, and you help set up. You just take orders, right? But so there's a couple kind of positions. So when we're setting up a stage, the first kind of process is, where's the stage, where's the power, where's our one power source. So typically you don't want to share grounds, because like you can start getting things where like you touch the microphone, you get zapped a little bit. So every time your lip touch the microphone, you get zapped a touch, and like what a pain in the ass. Like for real, what a pain in the ass. Or you get where you have like, I think it's a mixed ground issue as well. If you have any voltage issues or any like water damage to the building, you start getting noise. So like you turn on the speakers, the guitar amps, and you just get this like really gross, like this whang. It's nasty, man. And you have to start like pulling grounds out of plugs or using ground lifts and stuff, man. It gets wild, right? And like all that stuff is just risking equipment, and then eventually risking people's health, right? Because like I've seen enough people get really, really electrocuted to know that like you have to respect electricity. So it's usually stage and electricity first. So, and then once the stage is built, we start dropping power where we need it from the main power drop. So we would run like one power source down, and that breaks into like a breaker box and a whole bunch of breakers, and those go, and you have like stage drops for the band. You can anticipate where your like left and right's going to be, where the power amps are going to be, and then where your different beaches are going to be. So you have front of house, which is going to be way out in the center, in the middle somewhere, and you can hear like what the audience hears. So FOH I refer to it as, or front of house that's called. When you're buying tickets, it's called mix. It'll say mix in like the little seating chart. And then there's another beach or another bay called Monitor Beach, and it's the very similar look, but that one's typically right beside the stage, kind of like at performer view. Like you have to have clear shots of everybody, clear eyesight to everybody, and you're painting a different picture. So one is for the audience, that's front of house, right? Those of you that work in kitchens and restaurants, front of house, right? And then there's the Monitor Beach, that's just for the band. So I like to imagine that there's like an invisible curtain that falls right at the front of the stage, and then you have two kind of hemispheres. You can tell that I'm like hella passionate about this stuff. You have two hemispheres essentially. So you have audience and you have band, right? So let's talk about the audience first. So you have, like, if we do like a small production, like it's not like a giant theater or like a stadium, you have typically like a left and a right mix, and that's from the house. So that's looking at the stage. You have left and you have right. Then you have your front of house and your lighting director typically together, right? And like when I was in this, you had a big digital console. Like I owned one that had 24 channels on it and a whole bunch of knobs and some, like it had 4 subgroups, all kinds of shit, right? And then underneath that, you had all this stuff. This is all processing. This is individual processing, analog processing. So the bottom one, I'll take pictures of it and I'll put it up. But anyway, the bottom one is it's a stereo compressor. So 2 channels. You can basically manage audio signal in as an insert. So it doesn't. So the microphone cable on the stage to where the front of house is going to be way too far. So you insert it on top of the channel and then it kind of interacts with it. And it does sound different than if you run it in line. So like if you take my microphone, plug it into a compressor, and then from the compressor into the sound system, it does have a little bit of a different sound. But just from an audio management standpoint in analog, we typically would insert it into the channel, and then it's just always dedicated for that one. So that one's a stereo. Above it, I've got gates. So we'd use those on like kick drums, toms, something like if it's windy outside. What it does is you can set the threshold of decibels. So anything under, say, like negative 35, it just won't make noise. So then when you hit the drum and it's like now, like, 85, 90, 95 decibels, it obviously you can hear it. The microphone turns on, everything else. So it just kind of cleans things up a little bit, right? Above that, I have a reverb unit as well. It's mostly just for show. It's like a vintage one that I love. But you would have like its own individual channel for that. Anyway, so like that, EQs, like a whole bunch more compressors, all the stuff that you use would be stacked in these giant boxes that you have to push around. And it would be for your mix, it would be all your processing. And nowadays, there's digital consoles that have all that. Like you can do most of it off an iPad or off a MacBook, a little bit of faders and a little bit of automation. You're basically sitting there making sure that nothing goes wrong, right? And then the lighting desk is beside that, but I'm sure there's a lighting channel out there that'll talk about that more. And then so when you have the front of house mix, what you're paying attention to is what the audience actually hears. So there's a really, really good course in LinkedIn Learning, and they follow Rush on tour. And Rush is one of the best performances I've ever seen, like from a management standpoint, from like an audibility standpoint, volume management standpoint. It was probably one of the quieter concerts I've heard for such a large stadium. And we were 17th row on the floor. So like it was nuts, right? But you're trying to paint a picture for the audience. So you have to take into account who is your demographic, like who is sitting in front of you. Because, if you have like an older demographic or like a crowd that is seated, they're visiting, you don't want to just be blasting them with kick drum and snare drum and all these wailing guitar solos, right? But like you also have to feel the room, because like if that's what you got hired for, then it kind of is what it is to an extent, right? And like they make at this point, I'm not going to rip off the whole the Rush thing from the LinkedIn Learning, but the whole point is that you need it to sound like the band. You need it to sound like the record. And people kind of expect that to an extent, right? And there's a lot of like other processing and stuff you can get into with like, setting up room sounds for drum kits and compressors and gates. And we'll get into all that in the future. But the main kind of responsibility of the front of house or the audio technician, the live audio technician, would be to give the audience what they're hearing from the stage. So that's the first kind of hemisphere, right? So from that console, you chase it all the way down to where the stage is, and all the microphones are on the stage, but you have to get all their signal out, like, sometimes 150, 200, 300 feet way out there, right? So you have what's called a snake, a cable snake. So in an analog console, it's like 40, 50, 150 cables all wrapped into one bundle, right? I got a picture for it. And that runs all the way up to the stage, or like to where you have kind of like a safety spot, and all the microphones, all the direct ins, all the instruments, everything plugs into that. And that's like your main hub of audio, right? You can even have speaker sends on there if you have like a left and right mix from the house that's coming in, or if you have any like auxiliary speakers. Everything gets housed into this one box. Nowadays, I think it's done through Cat5 or like Ethernet, so you can split it off into a bunch of stuff. But so like my first one was just a single run. It was just cables go in here, it extends 100 feet, they plug into my console. But when you want to do a mixing position, you have a mixing board set up, now you need 2 sends. So one of them goes to the front of house, and now you have a split tail. So I'll post a picture of that too. All the same inputs, two outputs. One goes to this console, one goes to that console, totally independent of each other. So you can have individual gain structures, you can have individual mixes, everything set up differently from two different consoles off the same input. So one stage, two consoles, right? From the monitor desk, the console itself looks very different. Everything that's going to be used and presented as audio or as feedback for audio is going to be like a flush on the console. So it's going to be run at zero, kind of like at unity. All the faders are going to look straight across the board. All the volume faders are typically going to look straight across the board, especially if they're in stereo. And then you have different mixes instead of a left and right, like a picture you're painting. You have individual places where you need everyone to be able to hear each other, right? You can't always see each other on a big stage, especially if there's dark, like blackouts or smoke. So you need to make sure that you can hear all the cues. So I talk lots about performers having in-ear monitors. I have mine. They're literally they're just really fancy headphones. That's all. They don't sound great when you listen to like MP3s, but when you sing into them, you listen to a kick drum through them, they sound fantastic, right? So everybody has their own. The monitor technician is there to make sure that each individual performer can hear what they need to hear, not the audience. And it's not just a big blend. So like when I was performing, I liked kick drum, snare drum, and toms, because y'all know how I like drums. Like I would have like a small mix of the whole drum kit. Not very much of my own guitar until I went into processing guitars, because then I didn't want any stage volume, but not much of my own guitar. A lot of the lead guitar player, because I didn't like standing on his side of the stage. I just let him do his thing. And I didn't need any bass. Bass player was loud enough. And just lots of my vocal, lots and lots of my vocal, lots and lots of the guitar player's vocal. It's just two singers. So that was what my mix was. But the next person, it could be totally different. There's no dependence on each other, right? As long as I'm singing into my microphone, it could be at different levels everywhere. And everyone in the audience gets like the main mix, the main left and right, like the record, right? So here I am with tons of my vocal, and here's the guitar player with tons of his vocal and maybe 20% of my vocal. He just needs the cues, right? He can hear the rest of it. Maybe there's floor monitors. So the difference between a floor monitor and an in-ear monitor is basically it's an acoustic speaker sitting a few feet in front of you versus in-ears, right? And a loudspeaker comes with limitations on its own, just because like, you're fighting with chaos on the stage. Like now it's a noisy stage on top of instruments, drums, everything else that you're already trying to fight with. So you get what's called polarity issues. So if you have a dynamic microphone like an SM58, I'll have a picture of it too, and you have say two floor monitors for the superstar, for like the lead singer, you might start getting feedback issues where the microphone's picking up too much of the sound from the speaker, and you get this loop. And we've all heard that, where you get these like high squeaks and just this ringing and shit, right? So it would be like up to the monitor tech to address that, but in the audio development standpoint, you kind of pick that stuff. So like if we were running, and we didn't do very many big shows, we always ran monitor desks, but we didn't do very many like stadiums. So if we had two monitors for a lead singer, it was like a Beta 58 on it because it had a better polar pattern on it, and you try to avoid the feedback issues, right? And then what's cool is like you're kind of like, I was an FOH technician, and I felt like I was a part of the band. Like I felt like I was a part of the painting, of the art, and like I don't know, I got into it. Like I wanted to be a part of the band. I went to rehearsals. I asked them how they liked things. Like it was kind of my thing, right? But the monitor technician, man, you're right there. You're basically on stage, and you're like, if something goes sideways, man, you start getting problems. Like in the rest of this comment, we were talking about strain, and yeah, man, like vocalists all the time will strain themselves out, but because they're singing too loud because they can't hear themselves. So yeah, sure, check, it works, it's loud, but is the mix correct? Not always, right? So if and I'm a loud singer, and I usually check microphones, like if I'm doing monitor checks, I usually check them really, really, really loud so that I know I have that headroom, and then the performance is only hopefully 60-70% of that, right? And there's no feedback issues because I checked it at, blood bursting, like, volumes, and it sucks. Like I've probably got hearing problems because of it now, right? Which, by the way, as your local neighborhood friendly audio enthusiasts, go get your ears checked. Go get your ears cleaned. Go get your ears clean, bro. All you need is some 3% hydrogen peroxide. Come on, man. I can hear the earth whisper now. Like, oh. But anyway, back to the stage. So like if I'm checking a microphone and we're gain staging, so what that means is like when I yell at the microphone, each technician is checking to see how loud the mic is with the compressors and all the EQ and everything. And they're going to turn the input volume up. This is layman's terms, right? The gain is input volume from the microphone. They're going to turn that up until the meter starts showing and it starts lighting up a little bit. So I'll put a picture of a view up on there. Actually, you know what? I'll show you guys. Let me pull this up. So if I bring this console over here, so when I talk into this, you can see this VU lighting up. So that's showing my input. Well, it's kind of like a mix, but like if I turn the gain up, then this would go way up, but that's managed from the input of the actual microphone. So that's turning up how much of my voice it's actually sending to the console and the processing. Then you need to find a balance of level and output that actually goes to each output. So maybe it's a left and right from the FOH, maybe it's each mix, maybe you've got a few mixes or stereo mixes for the band. That's what the level, or like the volume as it were, does. So the difference between gain and volume is gain is like the source input. Volume is the output where it actually sends after all the processing and everything. And like I say, you can have that separated if you have individual output stations instead of multiple inputs. So it's not like you want to have a lead singer with two microphones, just one goes to a console here, one goes to a console there. You want to have one input go to two separate consoles. They can gain stage separately, and they can they can mix it separately as an output thing too. I hope I covered all that too. I feel like I'm getting all caught up in myself. So you have to have a balance, and like some really good advice. One of the first audio technicians that I worked for was if you don't send a feedbacking signal, you won't get feedback. You won't get feedback, and that makes sense, right? If you eliminate it at the source, then you won't get it, right? Another one is that if you have good input, you have good output, and it's because it's a healthy balance of the two, right? So to the third point in this, when and I'm not doing this in order, but when you have reproductions, or you have streams, or you have like an individual set recording, there's kind of two methods that you can have. So one is where you're just sending like a direct feed, like a left and right mix, and that's okay because it's like a low amount of work. You usually get like a good quality. You can have like left and right compressors in digital now that like make it sound really nice, but you're still at the mercy of the live performance. And what I mean by that is if a guitar player in a club has his guitar turned up very loud, might not be in the mix, might not need it in the mix, and the show might sound perfect. But since the output fader is turned all the way down, it's not outputting to the recording system anymore. So now you don't have the guitar. So you're kind of at the mercy of like the environment, right? And there are lots of videos where it sounds like it's like a kick drum's really heavily compressed, like it just sounds like the whole volume comes down, and that sounds like a left and right mix. There's a few other or it might even be just like a mono mix. So most consoles, I'll pull up a picture of my old console again. It'll have a left and right, and then a mono beside it, and that's just like a single fill, a stage fill, maybe a recording out. But same thing, like the loudest person on the stage is the quietest person on the recording, right? So then the other method would be you would go back to the snake, that initial head with all the inputs, all the direct inputs, all the microphones, everything that happens, like computers, tracks, CD players, everything needs to go there so it can output somewhere, and you take another link out of it. So today you have Cat5, you have Ethernet, you can do that as many times as you want to, I'm sure. In my day, I saw some triple head snakes. I saw some like fancy things that would interrupt the console signal passively, and then like move it over and move it into a console. But then back to let me pull this back up, this console. Now the live performance is happening. You have a front of house technician mixing for the like the actual performance, what everyone's listening to in the crowd. You have the monitor technician who's beside the stage, making sure the band can hear everything, maybe taking cues off like a comm set, a headset, with the stage manager, or like we saw in the Anderson .Paak video where he actually had a Bear Dynamic microphone set up for him. And then the recording engineer would have all the individual inputs, pre-gain, pre-processing, pre-everything. So you just have a whole bunch of microphones and a whole bunch of inputs, guitars, keyboards, whatever you want, all at your hands again. So the kind of beauty in that is that you don't have to rely on someone else. Maybe if you show up to a festival, maybe they just have a house person, or maybe if you can't afford to bring a traveling technician with you, but you get the opportunity to record everything, you could pay someone in post that you trust. So those are kind of like a very, very surface level kind of look at like how like the stage was set up and some of the things. So like I say, it starts with power, it starts with staging. You got to know where you are. You got to know where like your home is. If you can't turn everything on, you have nothing, right? And then from there you start building up bays, and you have teams that go and you kind of tackle these areas, right? And it's neat. Like I say, like I'm very, very passionate about the job of an audio technician, and like for the bunch of years I was fortunate enough to do that. It was a lot of fun feeling like I was a part of a band and a part of a production, that was, I don't know. In my eyes, it's like it's the end of the funnel before it goes out. You know what I mean? Like if the left and right is no good, then it doesn't matter how good your band is. If you can't hear the singer, it doesn't matter how good they are, right? Like, so that's just like a very quick glimpse at that, and I hope that made a little sense and shed a little light on a few things. And sorry, I wanted to get into one more thing about the strain. So there's a couple situations. So one is where a singer will back away from a microphone and they're leaving the microphone a lot, and then you start getting volume issues where you're losing them in the mix, in the front of house mix, and that typically means the monitor is now too loud, right? You could turn it down a little bit and let them be a little more comfortable, because you got to be able to perform at a certain volume to be able to add the right emotion and intensity as well, right? Like if I just started singing right now, I wouldn't maybe I could because I've done it lots, but like to sing full volume like I would with a band, it would just be so different, right? And then the other side of that is if you have someone, I was making this point earlier, if I'm personally checking a microphone and I'm loud and they're gain staging it and it's showing up full in that VU, and someone else comes in and they're now clipping it and like setting it into like red where it's distorting, it's probably because they can't hear themselves. So you need to turn the volume up, not the gain because they're too loud, the volume, the output, right? They need to be able to hear themselves. They're fighting to hear themselves, and you don't want that to cause any strain or loss of quality to the singer, right? You want the performer to not struggle because of something like overlooked, right? So anyway, I appreciate that. That was 22 minutes of responding to a comment, but I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. And like for those still listening, I love all the feedback. I love all the questions because I want to do more of these. Constructive feedback, absolutely. Constructive criticism, bring it on. You come tell me what to do just because, different conversation, but I love hearing it. I love questions like these. I'm going to get into tuning down and changing changing keys for singers next, and I'm looking forward to it. See everyone again soon.